At Thanksgiving dinner, my son said, "Shut up, Mom, nobody cares." I stood up, left my napkin on the table, and walked out. That night, I stopped paying their loans, emptied the account I'd funded for years, and booked a one-way ticket. By morning, there were 55 missed calls. My name is Margaret Ellis, retired nurse, widow, and a mother who once believed love meant sacrifice. The apartment I left behind had the softened hush of a place lived in alone. The tick of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint scent of lavender over old paper. In my lap, a faded photograph. Thomas and me outside our first apartment, young and glowing, as if the world had thrown open its doors. It's been nearly 30 years since his heart failed without warning. I still hear the doctor's voice. I still see the sink where I clutched the porcelain and made a vow to the woman with swollen eyes staring back at me. My son, Daniel, will have every chance we never did. He will not know want. I will make sure of it. That promise became an engine. At Mercy General, I took double shifts until exhaustion felt normal. My feet ballooned inside old nursing shoes. My back burned like a dull coal. Dinner was canned soup in the break room, gulped before the next call light blinked. I drove an aging Corolla that sounded like loose silverware, mended uniforms at the kitchen table, wore dresses 10 years out of date, clipped coupons like chaplets. The small account I called Danny's Future Fund held more than money. It held a version of myself who believed this would all be worth it. When Daniel taped up report cards full of A's, I pinned them above the sink and washed dishes through tears. He wanted to go out of state for college. I smiled and said we'd make it work, then sat up half the night with a calculator and lukewarm tea, shuffling numbers until the impossible looked barely manageable. When the acceptance to Columbia arrived, we stood shoulder to shoulder at the kitchen table, and his hands shook as he read. "I got in," he whispered. I hugged him, and for the first time in years cried from joy. Later, alone, I counted tuition, room, board. It was more than I made in a year, but I didn't hesitate. I cashed out savings, took a personal loan, and filled every schedule with overtime. The bleary sunrises and meals eaten standing up felt like steps toward his future. 4 years later, at graduation, I clapped until my palms stung. He didn't see me in the crowd. That didn't matter. I had kept my promise. Then came Vanessa. The first time she breezed into my apartment, the space smelled like her perfume for hours after she left. Polite, poised, eyes skating over my simple furniture, she seemed like a magazine page come to life. Daniel looked at her the way I used to look at Thomas, like she was a continent he'd just discovered. When they got engaged, her dream wedding unfurled. Riverfront Club, white roses, a band that learned special requests. I nodded and did the math in my head. When Daniel came by, careful not to meet my eyes, "We're a little short," he said. I broke into my retirement account and wrote the check. The wedding was perfect. Vanessa glowed. Daniel spun her under chandeliers. I stood at the edge of it all with a champagne flute, smiling through fatigue. Later came the house 2 stories in Maple Ridge, big yard, marble counters. I warned it was too much. "It's an investment," Daniel said. "We'll manage." When the bank hesitated, I provided the down payment with the last of Thomas's life insurance and co-signed the mortgage. He squeezed my hand. "You've always believed in me," he murmured. I smiled, though the pen felt heavier than any IV pull I'd pushed. I visited every Sunday with a pie. At first, it felt like belonging, like the harvest from years of lean. I told the grandkids, Ben and Lila, stories about their grandfather, the Thanksgiving he dropped the turkey and laughed until he cried. They giggled. Later, they checked their mother's face before they laughed. I told myself I imagined it. The shift came quiet and slow, like a hairline crack in a glass. One Sunday, as I began a story about Daniel's first day of school, he exhaled a soft, annoyed sigh. "Mom, we've heard that one," he said, smiling thinly. I laughed along, though something inside me drew tight. Vanessa's gestures grew sharper under velvet. "You just sit, Margaret. You've done enough," she'd say, light as dust, blocking me from the kitchen. When I offered my pot roast recipe, she chuckled. "You're adorable. We use air fryers now. Daniel chuckled too. It wasn't cruelty, just habit. Somehow, that hurt more. I brought a family album one Sunday, leather-worn, pages yellowed with our lives. Thomas holding infant Danny, the first bike, our tiny duplex in winter. Maybe we could look through these after dinner, I said. Vanessa didn't look up from her wine. Oh, not now, Margaret. No one wants to sift through dusty old things. Clutter, she called it. The word landed like a slap. Daniel's eyes slid away. Maybe later, Mom. I pretended not to notice as I turned the pages alone. The children picked up the tune. We've heard this one, Lila said. Ben echoed her, half giggling. Yeah, Grandma. I smiled, said they were right. Washed a single plate 3 times that night after I got home, whispering excuses for everyone. But awareness took root. I was becoming a ghost in a house I had helped build. Thanksgiving looked like a postcard, catered spreads, polished floors, candles trembling in glass. Vanessa had told me dessert was covered. I brought pies anyway. If it makes you happy, she'd said. I sat near the end of the long table and tried to be careful with my words. A lull opened. Your grandfather and I once had only a roasted chicken, I began, smiling. He burned it, so we ate boxed potatoes and laughed all. Shut up, Mom. Daniel didn't look up. It's boring. Nobody cares. The room went still. Vanessa smirked into her glass. The children stared at their plates. I waited for his eyes to soften, for an apology to float up. Nothing. I set my fork down. The small clink rang like a bell. Excuse me, I said and stood. No one stopped me. Laughter rose again behind me, thin and distant, as I took my coat and walked into the cold. I sat in my car under a bare oak, watching the house glow like a jewel. The tears arrived quietly. Then all at once, years of fatigue and hope sifting out. When the sobs eased, I was emptied enough to see clearly. My sacrifices had become expected. My care, routine. I wasn't loved for what I gave. I was useful for providing it. In the hollow that revelation left, something hard and quiet formed. I whispered into the dark, enough. Back at my apartment, I pulled down a metal box, hinges squeaking, contents tidy from decades. The mortgage deed with my name beside Daniel's, the title to Vanessa's SUV, legally mine, statements for the emergency fund I'd bankrolled. I laid them out like instruments in a tray. He thinks I'm old and powerless, I thought. He mistook patience for weakness. I stacked the papers, squared the corners. Silence, I realized, wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Before dawn, I packed a small suitcase, a few clothes, my nursing license, Thomas's wedding photo, the metal box. I didn't leave a note. I drove while the sky unspooled from charcoal to pale. Ohio slipped into Kentucky, then Tennessee, then the flat gold of Georgia. By evening, I was in St. Augustine, Florida, signing for a sunlit apartment with clean floors and a small balcony over the sea. That night, I stood barefoot under moonlight and felt the water's steady breathing untie a knot in my chest. In the morning, I made coffee and began the calls. Good morning, Elena, I told my attorney in Cincinnati. I need to update my will. I established the Thomas Ellis Nursing Scholarship. Everything goes there. And your son? Elena asked gently. Disinherit him, I said explicitly. No ambiguity. Silence then. Understood. Next, my financial advisor. I liquidated the joint emergency fund and moved the balance into a new account only I controlled. He wavered. Are you sure? It was my money, I said. I'm sure. I called the bank. I intend to remove myself as co-signer on the Maple Ridge mortgage. The representative warned that would require refinancing from the primary borrower. Send the notice today, I said. Finally, the insurer. The Lexus registered to me, I said. It's no longer in my possession. Begin repossession proceedings. When the last call ended, the sun was too bright to look it straight, and the gulls complained over the surf. My coffee had gone cold. For the first time in decades, every action felt like it belonged to me. The calls started 3 days later, 1 or 2, then a squall. Mom, where are you? Daniel said in the first message, irritation dressed as calm. Call me back. I pictured him at the Marble Island, fingers tapping, assuming I'd bend like always. I deleted it. By the next day, Vanessa sounded small. Margaret, the tow truck took my car. They said it's in your name. Please call. Consequences aren't loud, they're desperate. By day 5, composure had cracked. Mom, Daniel shouted, breath jagged. The bank says we have 30 days to refinance. What are you doing? You can't do this. It's our kid's home. You're destroying this family. I stood on my balcony in the Florida sun, the phone warm in my palm, and let the messages stack up like distant thunder. Families don't shatter in a day. They erode until a single word makes the fracture visible. I deleted every one. Life became simple. Clinic volunteering, coffee, salt air, evening walks, where the tide curled around my ankles. My hands steadied. I slept. Sometimes I thought of the Maple Ridge house, the way it trapped light in the late afternoon. Mostly I thought of breathing. One morning, with the ocean shimmering like hammered metal, I understood something new. I was not just a mother or a widow or a purse with legs. I was Margaret. My son wanted me silent, I said to the wind. He got his wish. My silence took what had been taken for granted and handed me back my life. The waves answered in their patient language, and for the first time in years, quiet felt like peace.